Welcome to the webinar. We're just getting people in the room and getting things started. So we've got about another 3-4 minutes before we actually launch into the full event here. So you've got some time to get yourself a nice cup of tea, coffee, whatever you happen to prefer, and find all about what it is to be a verifier in EDDMapS. We've been pretty excited about how these office hours have been coming together. Every time it seems to be more and more folks coming in. So this is a good thing. It seems people are appreciating knowing a little more about what's going on behind the scenes. I will say that we are always looking for new topics. Next time we're going to be talking about how to get data out of EDDMapS. So if at any point you think to yourself, I always wanted to know this about how the system works or how I could do things, feel free to send us a note. You can drop a note in the chat, let us know about topics you'd like to hear about. Or you could always say it's for a friend. I don't want to know, but a friend of mine wants to know. It's always a nice way to hide where you're not quite sure and don't want to necessarily put your neck out there. So thank you for joining us. We do appreciate you all. We got another couple minutes and we'll get started. We do have quite a diversity of folks that are actually joining the webinar today. Just looking at our people who are coming in, good to see some friendly faces. I'll also mention that if you happen to be hearing impaired and are having trouble understanding us because, well, some of us, like Chuck, have that nice thick Southern accent, you can turn on the captions below. There's a place for the live transcript. You can watch the captions as Otter AI is attempting to help us be understood better. It is fun to watch, especially when Chuck talks, because it doesn't always understand Southern. So good times, things you can do in Zoom while on a webinar. We'll be getting started here in just a minute. And we are now right about 11 o'clock. A few folks still coming in. And again, thank you all for coming to these office hours. We set these up under the idea that there are definitely aspects of EDDMapS. Nobody knows all the stories about how folks are using it and how it can be put to use. So this has been fun for us, coming up with new topics every month to make sure we're covering what people are interested in and getting people enrolled in the right places. So with that, we are at our start time. Today's topic, so you want to be a verifier. Quality data doesn't just happen. There's a lot of setup that makes that come together. And Rebecca is going to walk through all the fun of being a verifier. If at any time you have questions, we do have the Q&A. If you put it in the question chat, it will let us make sure we respond to your answer to your question. So at any point you can put that in there. With that, take it away, Rebecca.
Hello, I am the EDDMapS coordinator and I do this presentation a lot. So I have it pretty well down, and that also means it's entirely possible I will forget something since I've said it 100 times before. So if you do have any questions, like Joe said, put them in the question section to make sure that I cover the particular topic you're interested in or question you have. I am going to literally start from the beginning and go all the way through the review process and all the different ways records can be reviewed. I'm not going to go over data necessarily flowing through the database or flowing through the system. This is very focused on the review and verifier process as much as possible. So I am going to start with how to request to be a verifier. So we added this request to be a verifier pane that exists in the My EDDMapS section. So if you go to let me increase this a little bit so it makes it potentially a little bit easier to see. That didn't, I did a little bit. Okay, there we go. If you go to My EDDMapS and then request to be a verifier, if you click on that, this is a new form we developed a few months ago, and you can fill out for yourself, or you can request on behalf of someone else. So if you're requesting for yourself to become a verifier or to expand your verifier parameters, you can do so, leave it to how it is set here, where it fills in your own email address. If you want to request from someone else, it'll remove your own email address and you put in their email address. And then you fill out the form with their qualifications, where you or they should be a verifier for. So again, this is your geographic scope. This isn't where you currently are located. So if you want to be a verifier for an entire state, you can just pick the states that would make sense for you to be a verifier for, which these three don't necessarily make a lot of sense. But this is where you would set your geographic parameters. Your taxonomic scope, this is where you would set what areas that you feel comfortable reviewing for. Now, these are just broad areas, broad divisions. We do have the other option. So if I click other, then in the comments, I'm going to say for these 10 specific species or this subcategory. So just aquatic plants instead of all plants. And then also we request references so that we can talk to other people who know who you are and make sure that we're adding people who have the proper qualifications for the scopes that they are requesting for, or that they're requesting on behalf of someone else. Once you would click submit, the request would come to system admins and verifier admins for review. We will very likely follow up with your references, potentially follow up with the person who would become a verifier to make sure the parameters fit. And then based on the information we gather, then the verifier status will either be accepted or will not be accepted. When we accept the form to accept isn't necessarily going to be exactly what you fill out based on the conversations we have. So just to let you know, if you make a mistake in filling this out, it's another form we fill out to actually add people as verifiers. Once we add you as a verifier, then as records come in that fit your verifier parameters, you will start to receive emails. To change the types of emails you receive, you would go to, if you're in your My EDDMapS, you go to your person name. If you are on the home page and logged in, it would be your user icon. But you would select My Profile and then Edit Profile, this button right there. And if you scroll most of the way down the page, you have verifier email preferences, and you have your options of instant or digest. Instant, that means every time a record comes into the database that fits your verifier parameters, you would receive an email. Digest means that within a 4-hour period, all the records that come in that fit your verifier parameters will be sent as usually one email, but if there are a lot that come in, it may be a few emails to contain all of them. What that looks like is this. So this, I am signed up for Digest, and so I get an email with one or more of the records that come in, and it tells me the information about the record, and I can view this one record online to review it, or I can view all the records that fit my verifier parameters by clicking this link. So I can go either view just this one, or I can view all of them. If I select to view just one, I'll show you what that looks like in just a second. And if I select to view all of them, it'll take me to a table. Another way to reach that table is through the My EDDMapS page. If you click on Admin Tools on the left bar, and then the first option is Review Records. So this is the same page that would take you to through the email. So if you see, you'll notice that there are a lot of filtering options at the top of the page. You can also sort by a lot of these different columns. So if I wanted to see records by a certain person, if I only wanted to see certain species, if I was interested in only certain date ranges of records, I can sort and filter down what shows up in this review records table to just what I'm interested in reviewing at that exact time. There's also the filter by option in the top left. So you can see if it would be the first report in a county, the first report by certain users, only images with records with images, and so forth. So there's a lot of filtering options so that you can pare down what you're trying to review at one time or another. So in this case, I have elected to see my records and one of my colleagues' records. So in this case, I've got 19 records that fit the parameters of these two accounts. As you can see, I submit a lot of test records, so we'll start with one of those. To review this record, I would click on the ID number for it. It would take me to the page where I can see all the information about this record. If this record were private, I, as a verifier, would still see the coordinates if they existed. I only see them in this instance where I can use them to help me to ensure the accuracy of this record. So if someone was reporting a cactus in the middle of a lake where a cactus may not belong, that would be cause for concern, which I would only know if I could see the coordinates, if they existed. I, as a verifier, will also get a couple of extra fields that don't exist for the general public. So in this case, this top field right here, this is the public reporter's name. This field down here, this is the account name. So if a person was reporting anonymously, which you can set anonymous status through your profile page, I will still see their name, and I will also see their email address, and if they included one, a phone number. And this is, again, just in the review process, so that as most of our verifiers are local, I could potentially know this person and know their qualifications for reporting these species. It gives me additional information that to be able to review a record as accurately as possible. In this case, I can see the additional information such as test site. This is also entered as a test record. And then here is the map. Again, if this were a private record, I would still see this map, whereas if this record were reviewed and made public, the map would not exist. Scrolling down, so that's the end of the record information itself. If I scroll down, this is where we get into the information that has happened since the record entered our database. The current status is unreviewed. If I wanted to send a message to if I wanted a message to be available and viewable to other verifiers, I would enter it here and click send. Now, this doesn't send an email to or some sort of other message outside the system to other verifiers. This is just leaving a message for other verifiers to see when they come and look at this record. So I could put in here that I'm in contact with the reporter, I'm following up on this, or any other message that I think the other verifiers would benefit from having this information. Below that, there are a number of buttons. So the white buttons allow you to do a certain number of things, which some impact the record itself and some are more for information gathering. So claim record, I am letting other verifiers know that I am taking responsibility for the information gathering about this record with the reporter. So if I need to contact the reporter to get more information, images, whatever, by claiming this record, I'm letting other people know, hey, I've got this. It does not prevent anyone from reviewing the record. It doesn't hold the review only for myself. It just lets others know that I am taking responsibility for communication so that we don't inundate reporters if someone reports something that's very high profile. Upload additional images. So if I went out to this site, or if I somehow acquired images of this population, I can add them to the record. So if the reporter emailed me additional images, or if I or a technician of mine or someone went out to the site and took images, those can be added to the record so that they can help with the evidence about the record. I can defer this record. So if I know that I'm going out to this site in a month and I want to actually go out and physically see this site, I can set up a reminder for myself. If I click this, and I can say, visit and review record. Oh, I didn't spell. And set a reminder of when I want to go out and review this record. And if I click continue, and I go back, refresh it so you can see it. I have set it's changed to the status to now that it's a deferred record to be reviewed at a later date. Additionally, I can request images. So again, I can upload images that I may have about this record, but I can also request images. So if I believe this reporter can go out to that location and take photos of the insects that are there, the disease that's present, so on and so forth, I can request they upload images to this record. It'll set the status as requested images, and it will also notify me as the verifier when the images are added. We can also request additional information. So if I click this, I can set a message in here about what type of information I need about the site, and it will send an email to the reporter with my message requesting additional information. Now, when they reply, it's just like replying to any other email. It is not documented in our system what their reply is. So that way, if there's any private information that needs to be exchanged, it stays private between the verifier and the reporter. And as I click these buttons, that is being documented in the history and discussion. So it documented my defer, it'll document if I requested images and so forth. Some of you might not remember these two gold buttons and this red button existing. This was a change we made several months ago. So if you haven't reviewed in a while, you may not recognize these. The change subject, make record negative, and delete record used to exist under the identification credibility field, which you'll see in a moment, but we pulled those out to make them separate from reviewing the record in and of itself. So if I look up here and I evaluate the information in the images and I say, well, that's not the right species, I have a couple of different options to deal with that situation. So I can elect to change the subject. So right now the subject is test record, but say this was actually something else. So let's say kudzu. If I change that record to kudzu, so I'm still on that record. The record now is a kudzu record, and it's not showing up here, but we do add another field called original reported subject, and it would show up in this information that the original reported subject was a test record. And so that's documented. You'll also notice it's documented here in this section as well. I can also make the record negative. So if this was originally kudzu, I can say, okay, no, this is in fact not kudzu. I'm going to change its status to negative. So you'll see it's been documented. It went from positive to negative. It's now a negative infestation status. So it's documented what has happened here, and that option is now gone. The other option is if it wasn't what was reported, or in this case, it was a test record from the beginning, I can select delete. So I can delete this record. I can say this record was a test record. And so I'm actually going to go ahead and delete this record, and we'll continue on with another record. So that record is now deleted from the database. So if I go back to here, let's pick another record. Tristan, we're going to pick your record here. So we've got this camphor record. So if we go down, we can see the photos, we can see the information associated with it. I'm going to select for this one, review and don't release for one specific reason, because I want to show you one additional option that exists. So as you'll see, there are a number of fields here. Not all of them are required. Reviewed by is the person or account reviewing this record. It automatically fills in my name. If someone else reviewed this record, or if your account was a communal account and you want to have an individual person's name associated when they're filling out these reviews, you can change this. Verification method. In this case, if we open that up, we have a number of different options. Reporter expertise is one of the least kind of certain ones, just based on the information provided. I am basing my review on the ability of the reporter to identify this species. So if Tristan did not have any photos, but I know Tristan and I know Tristan can identify camphor, then I would say I am basing this off of Tristan, the reporter's expertise. But Tristan did include photographs, so that would be more appropriate here. So photographs were included. That's how I, as the verifier, identified and the credibility of this record. I am saying that based on the photographs, this is camphor. You also have the option of saying specimens were collected, either voucher specimens, or if you have photographs as well as specimens. And then there's also verifier expertise. So if I didn't know Tristan, but I knew the area and the species, and I know that species grows in that area, I'm relying on the verifier's expertise. That's another kind of way to say that you're identifying and verifying this record is my own as the verifier expertise. Then there's also voucher photographs and diagnostic lab samples, which are more appropriate for diseases and some insects, things like that. Identified by, so this field is used if you, generally speaking, sought help to identify this species. So if I didn't know what camphor looked like, but Joe does, I could show Joe the photos and have him help me identify this. And so I did the actual reviewing of the record, but Joe's the one who identified it. And you could say the date he identified it. That is an option available as well. Identification credibility. So you have in this section, possible, credible, and verified from least to most certainty with regards to the identification. We don't give a lot more instruction beyond that because it's highly variable by species and by location, which of these would be appropriate. So if I were in a specific area that had no other species that looked like it whatsoever, I might be able to easily say it's verified from a photo. Whereas if I'm in an area that have a lot of lookalikes and the photo wasn't that great, or maybe it can't easily be identified from a photo at all, I might lean more towards possible, even though it's the same species. So we leave this up to the verifiers or to like a state's verifier network to make decisions on what criteria is appropriate for saying possible, credible, or verified. Now, one option that only exists when we're in this reviewed and not released section is unable to confirm. Unable to confirm is exactly what it sounds like. From the information provided, from the information I can gather, I am not able to say this is or is not this species. So in this case, I have unable to confirm that allows me to get this record out of the review queue, but it's not deleted. It's not gone forever. I can come back to it later if more information comes available. Report source ID, it's an optional field. So you can say, okay, I know Tristan works for a university, or maybe Tristan is doing this on Tristan's own time. So he is doing this as the general public. This is an optional field. It's not required. Private. So we talk about private a lot in various aspects. So I mentioned private earlier. If Tristan had wanted this record to be private, so the coordinates are hidden from the public, this would already be selected to yes. As it is, he said no, these records coordinates can be known, so he's selected to no. But I do have the option as a verifier to select yes if I deem it to be appropriate. And then finally, there are two additional fields. You have reviewer comments, which are private. They're not available to the public. But you as a verifier can add those comments if you need those comments to be added there. And then there's also public comments, which do go on the public record. So in this case, say I made the record negative or I changed the subject, I could say why in here. Okay, you know, the shape of the leaf or the flower or the fruit or the shape of, you know, the number of hairs on the leg of the insect or whatever reason, I could say why I did what I did. And then when I was done, I would click submit. So this is exactly what the reviewed and released looks like, again, except for that unable to confirm option. It looks exactly the same. Once I would click submit, then it would either be showing up on maps, in downloads and so forth, or if it's not released, it would not show up there. So that's reviewing through the website. We do have another way to review records, and let me see if I can quickly get this up. There we go. So you can review as a verifier through EDDMapS Pro. So I downloaded all the records for Tift County. And if I zoom in to certain areas, you'll start seeing these orange markers pop up. In the top right under this help button, you can see, orange means contested or unreviewed. So these are records that I, as a verifier, when I downloaded the data set, they were downloaded with it, and these are records that fit my verifier parameters. So if I click on that, I can see that this is a sugarcane aphid record. And if I click view details, I can elect to review this record. This record in its entirety is only available to people who are allowed to review sugarcane aphid in at least Tift County, Georgia. If I click review records, you'll see I don't have all those other buttons. I don't have defer, I don't have request images. This is all just the review form. So I can from here select any option except delete and unable to confirm. Those are not options for this field. So I could potentially say, okay, this is possible based on whatever information makes it possible. My options are, did I collect specimens, based on my own expertise, if I didn't collect any photos, anything like that. Report source ID, it's the same as from the other page. And then again, we have reviewer comments, public comments, and here's where you select if you want it released or not. So this is a little bit different, but it makes this all stay very nicely on one page. And again, you also have that private field. So this is, again, reviewing an individual record through the Pro app. And when you save, like with other things you do in the Pro app, it's saved to your upload queue. so that while you're out in the field, you can do a whole bunch of reporting and reviewing and all kinds of things. And then when you get back to Wi-Fi or mobile signal, then you can upload all of this work you've done. If we quickly go back to the review records table, I will show quickly, if I wanted to say, okay, everything by Rebecca is always going to be great. She's never going to make a single mistake. Or, you know, I just want to review a bunch of records at one time because I know that Tristan knows what he's doing. So I can use these little boxes next to these records and select the records I want to bulk verify. The only options are possible and credible. You can't delete a record in mass. You can't say everything's verified in mass. You can only do those two, possible or credible. You can release the records. You can make them all private. You can do those things. One thing that isn't showing up here that, let me see if I can find some real quick, is there are some icons that will occasionally show up in this table that are indicating certain things about the records. Here we go. So these little warning icons let you know, generally speaking, that maybe the area is large, or maybe the coordinate uncertainty is large, things like that. So little warning icons about the record that something may be a little suspect. There's also, again, let me see if I can find one real quick, an icon that will show up next to the location that will indicate if this record is has been marked private by the, there's another warning icon, by the reporter. Here we go. So these coordinates for this record have been marked private. So you can see a little bit more information through the table. One more thing I want to show you is the triage page. So if we go back to my EDDMapS, if we go under admin tools, you'll see that the second option is triage system. If I click on that, this is where we are getting tons and tons and tons of information from a large database. And I want to make decisions at a very high level, a very gross level. So it's just going to take a second because these are the records that fit my parameters, and I have all the parameters. It might look a little different to some people because we added a few things in the last few to several months. So this table lets you see where we are looking at. So in this case, say Florida, who reported it, in this case, iNaturalist. And right now, all of the records are coming from iNaturalist, but we could add other massive data sets in here before long. What species we're talking about in Florida from iNaturalist? Is that species considered introduced, native, so forth? How many records would be in this particular data set? How many records we already have in the database that are reviewed records for that species in that location? Does this species exist on regulatory lists or laws? And then finally, you have your manage options. So 2 verifiers means I want to review each and every one of the records in this batch I am concerned about. Bulk verify means I trust this particular batch of data and I want to say all of them can go into the EDDMapS database bulk verified. I don't want to view each one one by one. And then finally, there's ignore. I've already got 4,000 records of brown and knoll in Florida. We do not need another 25,000 records of brown and knoll in Florida. That's an understandable sentiment. So you could select ignore. So a couple of new options that you may not be familiar with are the subscribe. So if you want to be notified when more records come in for triage, you can elect to select to subscribe and receive emails when new records come in. We also have this species list option. So if all I care about are a particular list species, so let's say Utah noxious weeds. So these are only the species that exist on the Utah noxious weed list. It doesn't limit it to Utah, as you can see. But again, I have all the parameters. And then there's also the option of state, or which it was the default option to begin with. Everything was by state. But we also have county. So if we select county, this is going to go county by county and say, okay, in Erie, New York, for Phragmites, there will be this many new records added to this many existing records. And you can go on so on and so forth. In the top right, you can view the pending reports, you can view the stats. You can also have some training material here so that you can remind yourself what these different options mean and some things to take into consideration and so forth. So that is the basic triage page. Now, when you select either two verifiers or bulk verify, I do want to say that it's not a instant process. It doesn't automatically go from 3,400 records just existing in the triage system to 3,400 records that are now either publicly available on MAPS or waiting in the review queue for individual review. We only grab about this much information that you see here while we're waiting for a decision to be made. Once a decision's made, then we go and grab the rest of it. So you won't go from clicking two verifiers immediately to the review queue and see 3,400 more records. It takes a little while to go and grab all the images and everything else associated with the records. I did want to make that very clear. And if you need additional information or a refresher course on anything I've talked about, if you go to the training page, so under tools and training, and then go to training, you will see that we have, where did you go? Additional training tools, maybe. How to verify a record. So this and the two links under it will take you to training materials on how to verify a record, claim a record, and what that means, and the individual triage system. As of this morning, I just finished updating the How to Verify a Record PowerPoint. So if you give me about an hour after we're done here, before you try to go and download it, it'll be completely and totally up to date. So I also am going to be working on creating a one-pager for the review page in and of itself, so that you can say, okay, I got to the record, I want to be reminded, what does this mean? What does it mean to claim? What does it mean to defer a record? What does it mean to, what does it mean identified by? Things like that. So that will be coming as well. So that is, broadly speaking, the a kind of crash course on reviewing a record, either through the website or through the EDDMapS Pro app, and then also the somewhat separate triage system. So I'm happy to answer any questions that come up, as well as anything about the review system in general. And if we have time at the end, if you have questions about other things, it is possible we will have time to address other questions you may have as well. So do we have any questions?
Chuck handled one that someone asked about, could you exclude different variables while on the review page when filtering down what you want? So that was our one question that's come in so far, and that's been answered. And kind of fun, the answers actually go to the Q&A section too. So if you're ever curious about what some of these are, you can always look it up there. We do have a new one. How do you change a determination after it's been received and reviewed?
All right, so if we go back to this review records table, in the top left, there are several links. View your recently reviewed records, view all recently reviewed records, view all recently reviewed but not public records, view deleted records, view unable to be confirmed records, and then we also have the clear filters link there. So if you did a whole bunch of filtering, you can't clear them all by clicking this link. So view your recently reviewed records. That is where you, as the verifier, have reviewed records and you can go back to them. View all recently reviewed records. These are records that fit your parameters that you may or may not have reviewed. View all recently reviewed but not public records. That's that review and don't release. As long as it's not been unable to confirm, which is its own category, as you can see, you can go there and re-review it, release it, anything like that. View deleted records. It is literally view. You cannot interact with that record once it's been deleted other than to see the information associated with it. Again, the only people who can restore a deleted record is, well, me. I have the documentation on how that's done. I could share it with Joe, but he would not want to do that. He's got a lot of other things on his plate. So I am the one who restores deleted records. It is a multi-page document, so I am very clear about what a reviewed record, what qualifies a record to be deleted. It's very, very clear conditions, such as that the record has absolutely no value as a changed subject. It has absolutely no value as a negative record. It's obviously a test record, things like that. Those are the reasons you would delete a record. And then finally, unable to confirm records. So if you went, marked a record as unable to confirm, but then you went out to a location later, or more information came available later, that record could be resolved better, you can click unable to be confirmed records link here and go to those records and find it. So if I go to view your recently reviewed records, which your is me, I can see the records that I have reviewed. So if I want to look at this, say, Henbit record again, I can click on it and I can look at this record once it comes up. And it'll say this has already been verified. If I can scroll down, I can see the information associated with it. I can see the image. So if I looked at this and went, oh man, what was I thinking? That's actually a purple dead metal or something. I can go back down to the section down here, and I have all of these same options except a couple have changed. Make restricted is the version of going from released to not released. Contest review, which sends it back into the review queue. So I could contest the review, send it back into review and re-review it, changing the subject as purple dead metal. I can delete the record, things like that. So I can re-review a record if I want to, mine or another record that fits my parameters. So that way, if you make a mistake like that, you can fairly easily fix it. Can I sort records that need to be reviewed based on essentially the way they came in, through the website, through the Pro app, through the regular EDDMapS app? We do not currently have that as a filtering option. So if I go back here, essentially source type is not an option for sorting and filtering at this time. Things are moving. I know there have been talks about stacking reports of the same species. Okay, consolidating records that are very close in proximity to each other. So is this something that will be done automatically, or will counties and states have to request that? At this time, there's no automatic way to do it. We have done this in the past for specific states for the data that they generate, because there was historic data where they did not revisit existing records. They just took new records every time. They just went to areas they knew where these populations were, and they just took new records every time. So we have consolidated records in the past, but there is not, it was not an automated process, and it was something we did in close conversation with the group that generated that data. So at this time, it is something that could be requested, but we would have to work closely with the essentially the groups that generated the data to do that. I do agree it would help clean up some data where you have a lot of points next to each other.
Well, and we have been having discussions about could we automate that routine? We've gotten into some interesting issues where two groups may not have actually been aware that each other existed. And if you saw that, yeah, that's a revisit of this thing that another group was looking at. It can sometimes get fascinating to see how that discussion goes. So it is something we are looking at possibly automating, but we're not there yet. It's always fun working with people.
The other thing that comes into play when you talk about automating it is they may be 10 feet apart. Those populations may be 10 feet apart, but they may be on different property ownerships. You could be talking about one record being on public land and one record being on private land. And so even though they may be close enough to be considered maybe at the same population, they may not want them to be one record because they may be managed completely differently. Often get Asian giant hornet reports without photos. Highly unlikely those are correct. I circle back with the reporter, but what should we do with that report? So this kind of comes back to what would make that record most useful. With something like Asian giant hornet or zebra mussel, things like that, where it's a high profile species, does it make sense to make those negative? The person looked for Asian giant hornet, whatever, but it wasn't it. If you can prove it wasn't it, then making the record negative makes sense. If it was in fact something like, instead of zebra mussel, it was quagga mussel, then it makes sense to change the subject because you're going from one very concerning invasive species to another very concerning invasive species that needs to be managed and monitored and tracked and so on and so forth. But if you're talking about something that you have no way to confirm or not, that's where that unable to confirm can come into play. So again, it doesn't delete the record. So if you have a situation where there wasn't a photo, you can't confirm it one way or another, but someone reports it a week later and they have a photo, it's possible that original record was a possible instead of an unable to confirm. So you can kind of take it step by step and think about, okay, what's the information available to me and how can I make this record have value? So again, if someone reported dandelion, a very, highly ubiquitous species, and you looked at it and go, well, that's a native aster. But if you look at the fact that if they looked 5 feet to the right and there would in fact be dandelion there, it doesn't make sense to change it to subject to that native aster, which isn't being managed. It doesn't make sense to change that record to a negative because it's a ubiquitous species. A negative record isn't particularly useful in this case. So in that case, delete would make sense. But when you're talking again about something a high profile as Asian giant hornet, a way to let that record still exist in some capacity because it might be useful is not a bad idea, not a bad path to go. So again, maybe make it negative or unable to confirm until more information is available. Can several nearby population reports be joined into a polygon? Just one second. So this question is a little bit, I can interpret this a couple of different ways. So if you have existing data in the database as say points string along a roadway, if you draw a polygon, it's not going to negate the fact that those existing points already are in the database. It doesn't join them in any particular way. If in your own data set before it ever gets to us, so if you're using something like ArcGIS and you want to turn a whole string of points into a polygon or a line or something, you can do that in Arc and then send a shapefile of polygons to us. And so on your end, you did consolidate the points into a polygon before it came into our database. But if you just are looking at an existing map in the EDDMapS database and try to draw a polygon over a bunch of points that already exist, all you're doing is just adding another record, which is a polygon to the database. It's not consolidating those points.
Well, and I will say that as an aggregator, when we bring in data, we're trying to preserve that original provenance of the data, how it was originally sent in. Next week, you're going to hear about how you can export data from EDDMapS and use it in some of the visualizations we have. Once you've exported the aggregated set and what was made available, you can do whatever analysis on it you want. And that gets into some interesting things about, well, do you group it across property boundaries? Do you keep it where different groups are managing that infestation? How do you start talking about where this is? And is it okay to have a bunch of different polygons or points or whatever the case may be all on the map? It's been fascinating to me, and Chuck has more experience with the folks that are doing the management on wide scale and how they want to split up populations or deal with management applied to just basic occurrence data. So a lot of different ways that can be sliced.
I will correct you ever so slightly, Joe, unless you're feeling particularly ambitious. It's not going to be next week. It'll be next month.
There we go. The reason we keep her around.
Yeah. These are, generally speaking, scheduled for the fourth Friday in, is it fourth Friday? Third Friday.
We are on the third Friday.
Third Friday of the month. Okay, the next question, tips for following up with reporters requesting images or additional information. Even when we try to be friendly, it seems some of our reporters get a little intimidated by the process. So the thing we run into is you sometimes do know the reporter and sometimes you don't. So you don't necessarily know if the person you're contacting is intimidated by technology in general, or something along those lines. So it's possible that that's a problem you're running into. That I do know several people who hesitate in doing anything relating to computers or technology because they think they're going to break something no matter what they do, and they need a little bit more hand-holding. So that's not something that's easily overcome just with a message saying, hey, additional images were requested for your report. We do include a link in the email for additional images requested for them to go straight to editing that record. Maybe we can make that process a little more obvious, because we do get people who just reply to the email with the images. So I either they're not reading the emails, which some people just don't, or they feel daunted and they know they can just reply to an email and feel more comfortable with that rather than going and editing a record, which might seem like, well, what if I delete the whole thing on accident? So with requesting additional information, all we're doing on our end is opening up a message box for the verifier to put whatever message they want into it, which would be requesting additional information. So with that, I would suggest to be concise and specific. So if you're looking for more information about, is it on this property or that property, or if you're looking for specific information that can't be captured, say in a photograph, like the texture of the underside of the leaf, keep language very plain and simple as much as possible. And that would probably be helpful. There isn't a lot we can do just through email with making people supremely comfortable with a process like this, especially when we don't know their comfort level with technology.
Well, and I will say, I don't get the ones that are intimidated by the process. I get the ones that are indignant at the process. What do you mean you think I don't know how to identify brown marmorated stink bug? I love them dearly. It's my chance to show compassion and understanding. People give me lots of opportunities to do that, and I don't always succeed. So sometimes I find actually, giving them a call, talking it over, they're less likely to be indignant on a phone call than they are through email. I know that takes a lot more time, but for me, it also depends a little bit on how sensitive the topic is. Some species, like, so you just reported the latest creeping crud to come into the country. Let's have a little talk about that. It does take more time, but usually that starts encouraging them to provide some better reports in the future and to continue in the process, as opposed to being kind of discouraged and going, well, I would do it, but they don't believe me, so why would I bother? Good times.
Yeah, and we were seeing some of that with the Asian giant hornet. We were getting phone calls and emails from people who were saying that they've been seeing them for the last 10 years in Georgia. And it's one of those things that, as someone in the invasive species community, you know that it's highly unlikely that's the case, especially when the photos that are coming in are anything but Asian giant hornet. So it's also really hard with something like Asian giant hornet or Jora spiders or snakes, lizards, whatever, where everyone has the big fish story that it's, that was, that Asian giant hornet, that's like 6 inches long. And again, that's not going to be the case. So, especially when you don't have a photo to go by, it's people don't necessarily like being contradicted in those ways.
Yeah. Next question I'll let you take, because that one's whoo boy.
Oh, thank you, Joseph.
No problem.
How long should it take to have a record verified? That is quite a simple sounding question. The problem we run into is the species, the location, and the quality of the record. So if you are reporting sugarcane aphid, there's what, Joe, 1 or 2 people in the US that are really verifying for sugarcane aphid?
That are actively watching as reports come in and willing to follow up. Yes. Yeah. Frequently they don't get pictures with those reports.
Yeah. If you're reporting something that's high profile, like Asian giant hornet, it's possible that's going to be looked into much more quickly. If you're in an area with a lot of verifiers, such as Utah or Minnesota, Florida, places like that, where they have a active and extensive verifier network, it's possible the record's going to be reviewed a lot quicker than if you are reporting just a off the wall species in Kansas, where we don't have many active verifiers. It's highly variable. If you include no photo, if you include a blurry photo, those are also things that are barriers to getting records verified. If you want to see who would potentially be reviewing a record, you could go to the tools section under tools and training, and you can click on report verifier lookup right here, kind of in the middle of these database tools. And if you put in, say, Asian longhorn beetle, that's a good one. If we put that in Kansas, you have 3 people. If you put it in Georgia, you have 2 people. The reason is, in this particular case, it's a regulated species. If we move it to, say, Florida and change that to Burmese Python, you'll see there are a lot of people who are going to get that notification. If we move it to Utah, there's 3 people, 2 of which wouldn't touch it. Actually 3. These guys are aquatics people, so they wouldn't review that record. Luckily, you're not going to have Burmese pythons in Utah, so you don't have to worry about that too much. So it's going to be variable by location and subject as to who's going to get the record to review. And then it will also, on a case-by-case basis, depend on, again, the species and the quality of the record. So again, this is 3 people who would get this record, but none of them have this particular subject in their area of interest, so they wouldn't be reviewing it, even though they get the email for it. We have some people who are interested in reviewing one species and one species only. And we have some people who want to review everything that comes into their state because they are the invasive species person for the state, even if they wouldn't necessarily be qualified to review every single species that comes in.
Yeah, we've had some fun in Georgia of when someone reports Kogon grass in Georgia, within minutes to an hour, there will be a phone call to that person saying, hey, you said you just saw this. They have management dollars allocated to controlling that species. They have a response team that will show up and take care of it because they're serious about that one. They don't want that getting around and being a problem in Georgia. How long should it take for these? We all know that it's based on the resources that are available. While we wish that there was an infinite amount of resources to respond to every invasive problem, there just isn't. But it is still useful, even if there are reports that come in and are unverified, we still find that to be useful for having the discussions with those that are controlling the funds to say, look, you have a lot of reports coming in for this. People are interested and reporting on this because they're concerned. Perhaps we should consider allocating some more resources to support efforts in that area. So while some folks do get discouraged when they see, well, there's all these unverified reports, nothing's happening in this area, it's still useful for that information to come in and for the verifiers to have those discussions. You've made it through all the questions and we're at 12:01. If someone else has a burning question for us, great. If not, next month we'll be getting data out of EDDMapS and a little bit on using it. So you've seen all this data come in. You see the quality control that goes into making sure that what you pull out of EDDMapS is quality data. And so how do I take that and get what I need to put it into ArcGIS, QGIS, my own package? How do I get a map to show up on my own website? We'll go into some of those details next time around. And as always, if you've got a topic about EDDMapS that you'd love to have us talk about more, send a suggestion our way. You can find us at bugwood@uga.edu. or you can probably find our email address on any of our websites. We're always looking for another good topic to bring to office hours.
This, as you probably noticed, is being recorded. It will be made available through our training page. It'll also be on our YouTube channel. So if you know someone who would benefit from viewing the video, or if you want to come back to it after some time because there was something you don't remember or some question you had that might have been explained in the video, you can always come back to this at a later time.
We have a late-breaking question. Do you have any advice for dealing with private data? We have counties that have to mark certain records private, but the entire county team needs to know the location.
So this is where something like a project might come into play. So projects are a topic we discussed a couple of months ago. And the interesting thing about projects are that any data that is contributed to that project, the project admins, so there are a couple different user roles in projects. The project admins will see when the record is unverified, they'll see a little tiny bit of information, enough to know that the record exists. And once it's verified, the project admins, and there can be multiple project admins in a project, will be able to see private coordinates associated with the record. Now, it's up to the individual reporter to put their data in a project. You as a project admin cannot just grab a whole bunch of data and that's not yours and put it in a project, but you can publicize that your project exists and that people should be either moving existing data into it or contributing data straight to it through our apps. So that is a way for you as a person to be able to see data that is private. Again, records with private coordinates, you would be able to see those coordinates if the person put their data, their records in your project. Records can only belong to one project. So again, they would have to deliberately elect to move their records into your project for you and other project admins to see those coordinates. But there is a pathway to doing that.
And we are working on sharing data between projects and individuals to make that happen. I think, Chuck, isn't there some sections in EDDMapS Pro that also address that?
Yeah, but I don't know that it will do exactly what is needed in this case.
Okay.
And yeah.
Well, I'll blame my answer on it being lunchtime and being hungry. Don't answer questions hungry. It just ends to bad answers. So with that, we've gone through all the questions. Thank you all for attending. It's been kind of fun to see. I'm actually seeing verifier status requested emails coming in from some of you who have been on the call. So we'll be processing those in a little bit and look forward to having you contribute to data quality.
Thank you guys for joining, and we hope to see you for our next adventure.
Yeah, thanks everybody.